A shocking request. Natalie Brooks straightened her charcoal blazer as she walked down the marble corridor toward the executive suite. Her heels clicked rhythmically against the polished floor, each step measured and professional. She had worked as James Harrison's secretary for 3 years, and in that time, she had learned to anticipate his needs, manage his impossible schedule, and maintain her composure even when he was at his most demanding. But nothing could have prepared her for what he was about to say. The frosted glass doors slid open automatically, revealing the expansive corner office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. James stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him, his tall frame silhouetted against the afternoon light. Even from behind, he commanded attention. Everything about him was sharp. His tailored navy suit, his precision-cut dark hair, the straight line of his shoulders. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Harrison?" Natalie kept her voice steady, professional. He turned slowly, and she found herself caught in his intense gray eyes. They were analytical, always calculating, as if he could see straight through to the numbers and facts that made up a person's worth. But today, there was something different in them. Uncertainty, perhaps. Or was it desperation? "Sit down, Natalie." His voice was low, controlled as always. She settled into one of the leather chairs across from his massive desk, crossing her ankles and placing her tablet on her lap. "Ready for dictation? Ready for instructions? Ready for anything except what came next? I need you to marry me." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Natalie blinked, certain she had misheard. "Excuse me." James moved to his desk, bracing his hands on the dark wood surface as he leaned forward. "Not a real marriage. A temporary arrangement. 6 months? Perhaps a year?" The business deal. Natalie felt her pulse quicken. "I don't understand the Thornfield merger." Spoke as if explaining a simple business transaction. "The investors are old-fashioned. They want stability, family values. They've made it clear they prefer to partner with a man who has his personal life in order, not someone they see as a corporate shark who lives only for the next deal, so you need a wife." Natalie's mind raced, trying to process this absurd proposition. "I need the appearance of one. Someone intelligent, poised, who already understands my world." His eyes locked onto hers. "Someone like you, Mr. Harrison. I'm your secretary, not an actress." She stood, feeling suddenly trapped in the luxurious office. "I'm prepared to compensate you generously." He named a figure that made her knees weak. It was more than she could earn in 5 years. Enough to pay off her mother's medical bills. Enough to finally breathe without the constant weight of debt crushing her chest. Natalie turned away, walking to the windows. Below, the city stretched endlessly, millions of people living their normal lives, unaware of the strange negotiation happening hundreds of feet above them. "This is insane. It's a contract, nothing more. We attend functions together, maintain appearances in public, and after the merger is complete and secured, we quietly divorce. You walk away financially secure, and I get the deal that will transform Harrison Industries." She turned back to face him. "And what exactly would this arrangement entail?" The agreement. James pulled a folder from his desk drawer, and Natalie almost laughed. Of course he already had a contract prepared. He was nothing if not thorough. Its public appearances as needed. Attendance at business dinners, galas, investor meetings. We would need to be convincing. He paused, and something flickered across his usually impassive face. There would be no expectation of physical intimacy. Separate bedrooms when necessary. This is purely professional. Natalie took the folder, flipping through the meticulously detailed pages. Compensation structure, timeline, exit clauses, confidentiality agreements. It was all there, laid out like any other business deal. Except this deal involved her life, her reputation, her heart. "Why me?" she asked quietly. For the first time, James seemed to hesitate. "Because you're the only person I trust. You've proven your loyalty, your discretion. You know me better than anyone, which means you're the only one who could make this believable." He moved closer, and she caught the subtle scent of his cologne, something expensive and understated. "And because I believe you need this as much as I do." He knew about her mother. Of course he did. James Harrison made it his business to know everything about the people in his life. But instead of feeling invaded, Natalie felt a strange sense of understanding. He wasn't manipulating her. He was offering her a way out of the financial nightmare that had consumed her for the past 2 years. I need 24 hours to think about it. You have 12. James returned to his desk, already shifting back into CEO mode. The investor dinner is tomorrow night. I need your answer by morning. Crossing the line, Natalie barely slept that night. She sat in her small apartment, reviewing the contract for the 100th time, imagining what it would mean to pretend to be James Harrison's wife. The man was brilliant, demanding, and impossibly distant. In 3 years, she had never seen him show genuine emotion. He was all business, all the time. But the money. The money would change everything. At 6 in the morning, she sent him a single text, "I'm in." His response came immediately. "Car will pick you up at 7 p.m. We're something elegant. We have our first performance." The hours until evening passed in a blur. Natalie used part of her savings to buy a dress she could never normally afford. A deep emerald gown that hugged her curves and made her auburn hair seem to glow. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The car arrived precisely on time. And when she slid into the back seat, James was already there. He looked up from his phone, and for a moment, something unguarded crossed his face. Surprise, appreciation, something almost like desire. Beautiful. The words seemed to cost him something. Thank you. Natalie felt heat rise to her cheeks. You look quite handsome yourself. And he did. The black tuxedo was perfectly tailored, making his broad shoulders seem even more imposing. His dark hair was styled back, revealing the strong lines of his face. He looked like every inch the powerful CEO, but there was something in his eyes tonight that she had never seen before. Vulnerability. The first act, the investor dinner, was held at the Riverside Grand, one of the city's most exclusive venues. As they walked in together, James placed his hand on the small of Natalie's back, and she felt electricity shoot through her body at the simple touch. She reminded herself this was an act, nothing more. But her body wasn't listening. Remember, James whispered near her ear as they approached the reception area. We're madly in love. We've been keeping it secret because of company policy. But we're so happy we can finally be open about our relationship. Natalie nodded, trying to ignore how his breath on her neck made her shiver. The evening was a performance. James introduced her to stern-faced investors and their wives, his hand never leaving her waist or her hand. He looked at her with such warmth in his eyes that she almost believed it herself. When he laughed at something she said, the sound was rich and genuine. And she realized she had never heard him truly laugh before. You two are wonderful together, Mrs. Thornfield, the lead investor's wife said warmly. James, you've been holding out on us. How long have you been seeing each other? 8 months, James replied smoothly, pulling Natalie closer. I knew from the first moment I saw her that she was special. I just had to convince her to give me a chance. Did it take long? Mr. Thornfield asked with a knowing smile. Natalie found her voice. Longer than he'd like to admit. James Harrison isn't used to hearing the word no. Everyone laughed, and she felt James's hand tighten almost imperceptibly on her waist. When she glanced up at him, there was something new in his eyes. Respect, admiration, and something else she couldn't quite name. As the evening wore on, the act became easier. They moved together naturally, anticipating each other's movements. When dinner was served, James made sure her wine glass was always filled, and she reminded him to eat when he got too caught up in business talk. They looked to everyone watching. It's like a couple who had been together for years. Unexpected chemistry. The car ride home was quiet. Natalie watched the city lights blur past the window, her mind replaying the evening's events. She had played her part well. Too well, perhaps. Because somewhere between the appetizers and dessert, she had stopped acting. You were perfect tonight. James's voice broke the silence. So were you. She turned to face him. I almost believed it myself. He was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Natalie, I want you to know that I appreciate what you're doing. This can't be easy for you. It's not as hard as I expected. The words came out softer than she intended. The car pulled up to her apartment building, but neither of them moved. The space between them felt charged, electric. James reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, and Natalie's heart hammered in her chest. "Tomorrow we have brunch with the Thornfields. I'll send over some clothing options." His hand lingered near her face for a moment longer than necessary. James, she didn't know what she wanted to say, only that she needed to say something, anything to break the tension building between them. "Yes, this is just business, right?" His jaw tightened slightly. Of course, just business. But as Natalie climbed out of the car and walked to her door, she could feel his eyes on her. And when she turned back to wave, the look on his face made her wonder if this arrangement was going to be far more complicated than either of them had anticipated inside her apartment. Natalie leaned against the closed door, her hand pressed to her racing heart. She had agreed to pretend to be James Harrison's wife, but no one had warned her that pretending might awaken feelings she never knew existed. Her phone buzzed. With a text, "Sleep well, Mrs. Harrison." Despite everything, Natalie smiled. This was going to be interesting. A weekend getaway, the following weeks transformed Natalie's life into something unrecognizable. Suddenly, she was attending charity galas in designer gowns, dining at restaurants she had only read about in magazines, and spending nearly every evening at James's side. The charade had become her new reality, but it was the small moments that unsettled her most. The way James's hand would find hers under the table during business dinners. How he remembered she took her coffee with cream but no sugar. The protective way he'd guide her through crowds. His hand steady at her back. "We need to spend the weekend at my lake house," James announced one Thursday afternoon as Natalie was organizing files in his office. "The Thornfields are coming up on Saturday for a casual get-together. They want to see us in a more relaxed setting." Natalie's hand stilled over the documents. "A whole weekend. I have guest rooms." His voice was carefully neutral. "You'll have your privacy, of course," she nodded, ignoring the small pang of disappointment in her chest. What had she expected him to say? That Friday evening, they drove north out of the city. The urban landscape gradually gave way to rolling hills and thick forests. James drove himself this time. No chauffeur, and Natalie watched his profile as he navigated the winding roads. Without the constant buzz of business calls and meetings, he seemed different, calmer, almost peaceful. "You're staring," he said. A hint of amusement in his voice. "I'm observing," Natalie corrected. "In 3 years of working for you, I've never seen you drive yourself anywhere." "I like driving. It clears my head." He glanced at her briefly. "Besides, I wanted this time. Just us, without David hovering or phones ringing every 5 minutes. The lake house was stunning. Modern glass and wood architecture nestled among towering pines, with a deck that overlooked the calm water. Inside, everything was minimalist yet warm, nothing like his sterile city penthouse. "This is beautiful," Natalie breathed, walking to the windows. The sunset painted the lake in shades of gold and crimson. "I don't come here often enough." James stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Work consumes everything. Maybe that's by choice." The words slipped out before she could stop them. He turned to look at her, really look at her, and Natalie held her breath. Maybe it was easier than dealing with everything else. Walls coming down, they prepared dinner together, something Natalie never would have imagined James Harrison doing. He moved around the kitchen with surprising competence, chopping vegetables while she prepared pasta. They worked in comfortable silence, punctuated by occasional conversation about nothing important. Favorite movies, books they'd read as children, places they dreamed of visiting. "I didn't know you wanted to go to Scotland," James said, pouring wine into 2 glasses. "There's a lot you don't know about me." Natalie accepted the glass, their fingers brushing in the exchange. "I'd like to know more." His eyes held hers, and the air between them thickened with unspoken tension. They ate on the deck, watching stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The wine loosened their tongues and conversation flowed more freely than it ever had in the office. "Why did you never marry?" Natalie asked, emboldened by the wine and the intimacy of the setting. "Before all this, I mean, surely someone like you had opportunities." James was quiet for a long moment, swirling wine in his glass. My parents had a terrible marriage. My father was never home, always chasing the next deal, the next acquisition. My mother grew bitter and resentful. By the time I was 12, they couldn't stand to be in the same room. He paused. I swore I'd never put someone through that. It seemed kinder to stay alone. The raw honesty in his voice made Natalie's chest tighten. That sounds lonely. It is. He met her gaze. Or it was. Until recently, Natalie's heart hammered. James, I know this is supposed to be just business. He set down his glass and leaned forward. But I need you to know that these past weeks with you have been the best I can remember. Even if it's all pretend, it doesn't feel like pretend. The confession escaped her in a whisper. James stood, extending his hand to her. Dance with me. There's no music. We don't need music. Natalie placed her hand in his, and he pulled her up and into his arms. They swayed slowly on the deck, the only sound the gentle lapping of water against the shore. His hand was warm on her waist, his other hand cradling hers against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady. Natalie. His voice was rough, strained. Tell me to stop. Stop what? She looked up at him, knowing exactly what he meant, but unable to say the words that would end this moment. This, he lowered his head slowly. Giving her every opportunity to pull away, she didn't. The first kiss, when James's lips met hers. It was gentle at first, tentative, a question more than a declaration. But when Natalie sighed against his mouth, something shifted. His arms tightened around her, pulling her flush against him. And the kiss deepened into something that made her knees weak. This wasn't acting. This wasn't part of the contract. This was real, raw desire that had been building between them for weeks. Maybe longer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James pressed his forehead to hers. I shouldn't have done that. Why not? Because now I don't know how to go back to pretending. Natalie pulled back enough to look into his eyes. They were darker than usual, stormy with emotion. Then don't. Don't pretend. Not here. Not this weekend. Natalie, this could complicate everything. Maybe it already is complicated. She touched his face, feeling the slight stubble on his jaw. Maybe it's been complicated since that first night at the investor dinner. James captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. If we do this, if we cross this line, I need you to understand something. I'm not good at relationships. I've spent my entire adult life avoiding them. I will probably mess this up, and we'll figure it out together. Natalie smiled softly. Besides, we're technically already married. How much more complicated can it get? He laughed, the sound genuine and warm, and kissed her again. This time there was no hesitation, no holding back. His hands moved to her hair, tilting her head to deepen the kiss. And Natalie melted into him. When he lifted her into his arms, she gasped against his mouth. James, tell me to put you down. He was already carrying her toward the house. Don't you dare. Barriers broken, he took her to the master bedroom, setting her down gently beside the king-sized bed. Moonlight streamed through the windows, bathing everything in silver light. For a moment, they just stood there, looking at each other, both breathing hard. Are you sure? James asked, his hands framing her face with surprising tenderness. Instead of answering with words, Natalie reached up and slowly began unbuttoning his shirt. His breath hitched as her fingers worked down his chest, revealing tanned skin and lean muscle. When she pushed the fabric off his shoulders, he caught her hands. Your turn. His voice was husky as he reached for the zipper of her dress. The fabric whispered to the floor, and James inhaled sharply. Natalie fought the urge to cover herself, standing before him in just her underwear. The way he looked at her made her feel beautiful, desired in a way she never had before. You're perfect. He pulled her close. Skin against skin, and the sensation made them both shiver. They fell onto the bed together, a tangle of limbs and whispered words. James kissed every inch of skin he could reach, as if memorizing her body. Natalie ran her hands over the hard planes of his back, marveling at how different he felt without the armor of expensive suits. I've wanted this for so long, he murmured against her neck. Wanted you? I'm here. She arched into him. I'm right here. Their lovemaking was slow intense, filled with a connection that went beyond physical pleasure. Every touch felt like a revelation, every kiss a promise. When they finally came together, moving as one, Natalie felt something shift deep in her chest. This wasn't just attraction. This wasn't just chemistry. This was love. The realization should have terrified her. But instead, she felt a sense of rightness. As if everything in her life had been leading to this moment. To this man, morning after Natalie woke to sunlight streaming across the bed and the warmth of James's body beside her. He was already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Good morning," his voice was soft, intimate. "Morning," she stretched, suddenly aware that she was completely naked under the sheets. "How long have you been watching me?" "Long enough to confirm you're even more beautiful in the morning light." He leaned down to kiss her, slow and sweet. "I also had time to panic about 15 different ways this could ruin everything," Natalie laughed, pulling him closer. "And what conclusion did you reach?" "That you're worth the risk." He kissed her nose, her cheeks, her forehead. "That maybe I've been running from the right thing all along." They spent the morning in bed, talking and touching, learning each other in ways they never could have in the confines of their professional relationship. James told her about his lonely childhood, about building his company from nothing, about the fear of failure that drove him. Natalie shared her dreams of becoming more than just a secretary, her guilt over her mother's illness, her fear that she wasn't enough. "You're more than enough," James said fiercely, pulling her on top of him. "You're everything." When hunger finally drove them from the bedroom, they cooked breakfast together, stealing kisses between flipping pancakes and brewing coffee. They ate on the deck, wrapped in blankets, watching boats glide across the lake. "The Thornfields will be here in a few hours," James said, running his fingers through her hair. "We should probably shower. Separately, or we'll never leave the bathroom." Natalie blushed, probably wise. But before she could move, he caught her hand. "Natalie, last night. This morning, I need you to know it wasn't just physical for me. I care about you. More than I've cared about anyone in a very long time." "I care about you too." She squeezed his hand. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." The performance continues. The Thornfields arrived promptly at noon, bearing wine and warm smiles. If they noticed anything different between James and Natalie, they didn't mention it. The afternoon passed pleasantly. Boat rides on the lake and a barbecue on the deck. But Natalie was hyper-aware of every touch. Every glance between her and James, what had been acting before now, felt achingly real. When he put his arm around her shoulders, she leaned into him naturally. When their eyes met across the table, the connection was electric. "You two remind me of my wife and me when we were young," Mr. Thornfield said, raising his glass. "That look you give each other, like no one else exists. Hold on to that. It's rare." James's hand found Natalie's under the table, and he squeezed gently. "I intend to." After the Thornfields left, James pulled Natalie into his arms on the deck. "Stay with me tonight. Really stay with me. Not in the guest room. I thought you'd never ask." They made love again that night, slower this time, savoring every moment. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Natalie felt a contentment she'd never known. But beneath it lurked a thread of worry. What happened when they returned to the city? When the contract ended? When reality intruded on their perfect bubble? "Stop thinking so loud," James murmured, pulling her closer. "I can practically hear the gears turning in your head. I'm just wondering what happens next." Next, we sleep. And then we wake up together, and we take it one day at a time. He kissed her temple. "I know I said I'm bad at relationships, but I want to try with you. Really try, even if it's messy? Especially if it's messy." He tilted her face up to his. "You've changed me, Natalie. Made me want things I never thought I could have. I'm not letting that go without a fight." As she drifted off to sleep in his arms, Natalie smiled. Their fake marriage had become something far more real than either of them had anticipated. And while she didn't know what the future held, she knew one thing for certain. She was falling in love with James Harrison, and from the way he held her, as if she were the most precious thing in his world. She suspected he was falling too. Reality returns, Monday morning arrived too quickly. The drive back to the city felt like leaving paradise behind. Natalie watched the countryside give way to suburbs, then urban sprawl, and felt a knot forming in her stomach. What happened to their weekend at the lake house when they walked back into Harrison Industries? When she was his secretary again, and he was the CEO? "You're quiet," James noted, his hand finding hers on the center console. "Just thinking about tomorrow, about work." He pulled the car over to the shoulder unexpectedly, putting it in park before turning to face her fully. "Listen to me. What happened this weekend? What's happening between us? It's real. It doesn't end because we're going back to the office. But how do we navigate that? Everyone still thinks we're in a fake marriage for business purposes, and technically we are. The contract doesn't end for another 5 months." James cupped her face in his hands. "Then we renegotiate. We make it real in every way that matters." He kissed her softly. "Unless you're having second thoughts?" "No." Natalie covered his hands with hers. "No second thoughts. I'm just scared. This is all happening so fast, and when things move fast, they can fall apart just as quickly. Not this time." His voice was firm, certain. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." They arrived at her apartment building, and James insisted on walking her up. At her door, he pulled her close, kissing her like a man who didn't want to let go. "I'll see you tomorrow at the office," he murmured against her lips. "Mr. Harrison," she teased, trying to lighten the mood. "Don't." He kissed her again. "When we're alone, I'm just James, the man who's crazy about you." After he left, Natalie leaned against her door, touching her fingers to her still tingling lips. She had entered into a fake marriage for money and security. Now she was in danger of losing her heart completely. Her phone buzzed. "Missing you already?" "Sleep well, my love," Natalie smiled, typing back. "Sweet dreams, husband." The unraveling the next few weeks were a delicate balance. At the office, they maintained professional boundaries, though it became increasingly difficult. Stolen glances during meetings, his hand lingering on hers when passing documents. The electricity that crackled between them whenever they were in the same room. David. James's assistant began giving them knowing looks. Other employees whispered when they passed. Their secret, or at least part of it, was becoming common knowledge. But it was Rebecca Winters, James's chief business rival, who turned their world upside down. She appeared at a board meeting uninvited, her expensive perfume announcing her presence before she spoke. "Gentlemen and ladies," she purred, her cold blue eyes scanning the room before landing on James. "I thought you should know something interesting about your CEO and his convenient new bride." Natalie's blood ran cold. James's expression remained impassive, but she saw his jaw tighten. "Ms. Winters, this is a closed meeting," James said coolly. "I think they'll want to hear this." Rebecca pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. "I have documentation showing that your marriage is a sham. A business arrangement designed to manipulate investor confidence. Fraud, essentially." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Natalie felt the floor drop out from under her. James stood, his voice cutting through the chaos. "This meeting is adjourned. Ms. Winters, my lawyers will be in touch about your slander. Slander requires lies. Mr. Harrison, I deal only in truth." The fallout in James's office afterward. Natalie paced while he stood at the window, his back rigid with tension. "How did she find out?" Natalie asked, her voice shaking. "She's been looking for ammunition for years. Somehow, she got access to the original contract." James turned, and Natalie saw raw anger in his eyes. But beneath it, fear. This could destroy the Thornfield merger. It could destroy everything, then we tell the truth. Natalie stopped pacing. "We tell them it started as an arrangement but became real. Who's going to believe that? It sounds like a convenient excuse. Then we prove it." She walked to him, taking his hands. "James, I don't care about the contract anymore. I don't care about the money. I care about you. That's real. And if we have to shout it from the rooftops to make people believe it, then that's what we'll do." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "I'm so sorry." I never meant for you to get dragged into this mess. I walked into this with my eyes open." She pulled back to look at him, "And I'm not walking away now. We face this together." His phone rang. It was Mr. Thornfield, and from James's expression, the conversation wasn't going well. When he hung up, he looked defeated. They're pulling out of the merger. They feel betrayed, manipulated. They want nothing to do with me or Harrison Industries. Natalie watched the man she loved crumble before her eyes. Everything he had worked for, everything he had built, was collapsing. And it was because of their relationship, real or not. "We can fix this," she said, though she wasn't sure how. "Some things can't be fixed." James sank into his chair, suddenly looking years older. Maybe this was always going to end this way. Maybe I was fooling myself thinking I could have both the company and something real. "Don't say that." Natalie knelt beside his chair. "We'll find a way through this." "How?" "My reputation is in tatters. The merger is dead, and you're caught in the crossfire of my mistakes. Then we rebuild together." A public declaration that evening, Natalie called an emergency meeting with James, David, and the company's legal team. She had an idea, risky but potentially powerful. "What if we don't deny it?" she said, standing at the head of the conference table. "What if we own it completely?" "Explain," James said, his eyes fixed on her. "We hold a press conference. We admit that, yes, our relationship began as a business arrangement. But we tell them what happened after, how it became real, how we fell in love despite the contract, not because of it." She looked directly at James. "We show them that sometimes the most unexpected things lead to the most genuine connections." "That's professional suicide," one of the lawyers interjected. "Maybe, or maybe it's the most honest thing a CEO has done in years." Natalie didn't break eye contact with James. People are tired of corporate facades. They want authenticity. We give them that. James stood, walking around the table to her. "You understand what this means? If we do this, there's no going back. Your name will be in every paper, every gossip site. Your privacy will be gone." "I know, but my privacy isn't worth losing you." She touched his face. "I love you, James Harrison, and I'm not ashamed of how we started. Because look where we ended up." Something shifted in his expression. The defeat vanished, replaced by determination. He turned to the team. "Set up a press conference for tomorrow morning. And Natalie, you better get some sleep. We're about to give them a story they won't forget." The truth revealed, the press conference room was packed. Cameras flashed as James and Natalie walked in hand. She wore a simple blue dress, no designer label, no pretense. He wore his usual suit, but had left the tie off. Looking more human than corporate, James spoke first, his voice steady and clear. "Thank you all for coming. I'm here today to address the allegations made by Ms. Winters and to tell you the truth about my marriage to Natalie Brooks." Natalie watched the reporters lean forward, hungry for scandal. 6 months ago, I proposed a business arrangement to Natalie. I needed the appearance of stability for an important merger, and I asked her to pretend to be my wife. She agreed for reasons that were her own. Paused, looking at Natalie with unmistakable love. What I didn't anticipate was falling in love with her. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed more rapidly. Somewhere between the first fake smile and the last business dinner, something shifted. I found myself wanting to come home because she was there. I found myself sharing thoughts and fears I'd never told anyone. I found myself becoming a better man because she inspired me to be one. Natalie felt tears prick her eyes as James continued. "So yes, our marriage began as a contract. But I'm here today to tell you that I want to tear up that contract and start over. Not as business partners, but as two people who love each other." He turned to Natalie fully now, taking both her hands. "I want to marry you again. For real this time. No contracts, no clauses, no end date. Just us and a promise to build something genuine together." The room exploded with questions, but James held up his hand. "Natalie has something to say." She stepped forward, her voice clear despite her racing heart. "When James first proposed this arrangement, I thought he was the coldest man I'd ever met. All business, no heart. I took the deal because I needed the money, and I thought 6 months of pretending would be worth the financial security. She smiled at James, not caring that her tears were now falling freely. But I was wrong about him. Beneath that corporate exterior is a man capable of deep love, unexpected kindness, and genuine vulnerability. He taught me that sometimes the best things in life come from taking risks, from saying yes to possibilities even when they scare you. Natalie turned back to the reporters. Our story isn't a scandal. It's about two people who found each other in the most unlikely circumstances. Yes, we started as a business deal, but we're ending as partners, lovers, and best friends. And I wouldn't change a single moment of our journey. James pulled her close and kissed her right there in front of all the cameras. It wasn't appropriate. It wasn't professional. But it was real, and everyone in that room could feel it. The aftermath, the headlines the next day, were mixed. Some praised their honesty. Others condemned the initial deception. But public opinion shifted when Patricia Brooks, Natalie's mother, gave an interview from her hospital bed. My daughter made a difficult choice to help me with medical bills, she said, her voice weak but clear. But she also made the bravest choice by admitting the truth and fighting for real love. I'm proud of her, and I'm grateful to James for seeing what I've always known, that my Natalie is extraordinary. The Thornfield merger surprisingly came back to the table. Your honesty impressed us, Mr. Thornfield told James in a private meeting. And your willingness to risk everything for love reminded me why I fell in love with my own wife. Let's talk terms again. But the biggest change was in James himself. He left the office at reasonable hours now. He smiled more. He held Natalie's hand in public without worrying about appearances. He had learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was courage. 3 months after the press conference, James took Natalie back to the lake house. They walked along the shore at sunset, the same path they'd walked the night everything changed. I have something for you. James pulled a small box from his pocket, dropping to one knee on the sandy beach. We're already married, Natalie laughed through sudden tears. Technically, yes, but we never did this properly. He opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. Natalie Brooks, you've turned my carefully controlled world upside down in the best possible way. You've shown me that love isn't a weakness to be avoided, but a strength to be embraced. Will you marry me again? For real this time, with our families and friends, with vows we write ourselves, the future that's completely, beautifully uncertain. Yes. Natalie didn't hesitate. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. I love you. Not as my secretary, not as my contractual wife, but as the woman who saved me from myself. I love you too. The cold CEO, who turned out to have the warmest heart. They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Behind them, the lake house stood waiting, witness to their transformation from business partners to soulmates. New beginnings, 6 months later, as they remarried in a small ceremony by the lake. Patricia Brooks walked Natalie down the aisle, healthy and beaming. David served as best man. Even Mr. and Mrs. Thornfield attended, having become unlikely friends and mentors. The vows they exchanged were nothing like the cold contract they'd signed a year ago. These were promises born from experience, tested by hardship, and strengthened by truth. I promise to choose you every day, James said, his voice thick with emotion. Not because a contract requires it, but because my heart demands it. I promise to be vulnerable with you, to trust you with my fears and dreams. I promise that our story is just beginning. Natalie smiled through happy tears. I promise to see the real you, not the facade you show the world. I promise to challenge you, support you, and love you through every messy, beautiful moment. I promise that with you, I've found home. When they kissed as husband and wife, truly and completely, their guests erupted in applause. But Natalie and James barely heard it. They were lost in each other, in the miraculous journey that had brought them from a fake marriage to the most real love either had ever known. As they danced their first dance under twinkling, James whispered in her ear, "Thank you for saying yes that day in my office. for taking a chance on a fake marriage. Natalie pulled back to look into his eyes, those gray eyes that now held only warmth when they looked at her. Thank you for showing me that sometimes the most unexpected beginning leads to the most perfect ending. This isn't an ending, he corrected, spinning her under the stars. This is our beginning. The real one. And as they swayed together, surrounded by love and laughter, both knew he was right. Their fake marriage had died the moment real love was born. And what they had now, what they would build together, was more genuine than any contract could ever capture. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely real, and that made it perfect.